Hi everyone, and welcome to another PlayUK webinar organized by British Council. I am Ljubica, and I will be your host today. PlayUK is a festival focused on innovation in games and interaction between art and technology. Now that it is a digital event, everyone online can visit it and enjoy its content. We prepared different story formats for all interested in the game industry to explore and learn from our PlayUK experts. Along with the talks and lectures, each month we will be having a live session in which a UK developer shares their knowledge and engages with the audience. So at today's webinar, I will be joined by Claire Morwood, and we will talk about how to create small and simple games within Bitsy, a free web-based tool for creating video games. But before we get started, a few service information. So this session will run for about 90 minutes, and it will be fully interactive and open to your questions throughout its duration. So please make sure to write down all your questions in the Q&A box, and I will make sure to go through all of them. This session is being recorded, and you will be able to find it on the British Council website and YouTube in the following days. So our today's guest is Claire Morwood, co-founder of the game development studio Threefold Games and an advocate of small tools for game development. Let's welcome Claire. Hi, Claire, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Awesome. So, Claire, could we start with you telling us a bit about yourself and what you will be showing us today?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I'm Claire. I'm a self-taught game developer based in Bristol in the UK. I'm currently a resident at the Bristol Games Hub and Pervasive Media Studio there, which are two sharing development spaces for people to work at. And so I'm currently working on a game with my company, Threefold Games. The game's called Before I Forget, and it's a narrative exploration game about a woman with dementia where you play as her and you are going through her house and looking at objects and sort of just unraveling the story of her life. So we've been working on that for about 3.5 years, and it's finally being released in a couple of weeks, which is very exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then outside of that work, I'm I guess a big advocate of using small tools like Bitsy for making games. So that's the main focus of what I wanted to talk about today.
Awesome. I really look forward to learning more about the tools you use and your work, and also your journey into game development. It will be a big part of this session. So now that you mentioned the game you're currently working on, we actually had a chance to try it out, to play Before I Forget at PlayUK, which was held in Belgrade this January, since it was a part of the games exhibition curated by We Throw Switches. But could you tell us more about your studio? And how did you? It's an all-female studio, actually, from what I've read. Like, how did you get around, and actually, how did the idea for a game like Before I Forget, how was it created?
So it was it's an all-female studio. It's me and Shella Ramanan, who's currently based in Sweden, although we met when she was living close to Bristol in the UK as well, and we met at a game jam in October 2016, so a while ago now, and the theme of that game jam was borders. So we were working as a team together, and we were trying to think of what we could do around that theme of borders. And then Shella had always been, so she's a writer, she's always been really interested in the concept of memory and how that affects sort of our identity and what happens when we lose contact with our memories. So we decided to go with that sort of narrative theme in terms of borders in a more, I guess, mental rather than physical sense. And then since then we've we work with a few other collaborators as well. So me and Shella are the company Freefield Games, and then we're working with artists and sound designers, musicians, voice actors as well to create the game.
Awesome. And what are the plans for the game? You mentioned that you have been developing it for 3.5 years already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it began. So when we started, both of us had full-time jobs, so we were sort of working on this weekends and evenings around that. So which is, I think, is why it sort of took the time that it did. And then more recently, in the last year or so, I've moved to doing freelance work alongside working on Before I Forget as well, doing the programming and the a lot of the art on it. So we've had a lot more time to contribute towards it. But we've taken it to a few events in that time as well, and which has been really nice to see people actually playing it and to get sort of in-person feedback as well on their experiences of it.
Yes, how are people reacting to this game? Because games are traditionally like those power fantasies, like I am defeating enemies, saving princesses, I am the hero of the day. But Before I Forget, it explores like the perspective of an, like you said, elderly woman who is suffering from dementia. So and in a traditional, it's sort of like a step back from that traditional definition of a video game. So how do players react to these games, which are like actually immersing them into real life experiences?
Yeah, I think people tend to react really well. Whenever we've been at events, we tend to get put in the parts of the exhibit that are kind of more like alternative games and stuff like that. So I think people are sort of expecting, I'm not sure what they're expecting from that, but you know, they're sort of maybe already know it's not going to be a traditional game as such. But I think people are really keen to see more games that explore a sort of wider breadth of narratives, because games are such a good medium to, you know, tackle these kinds of subjects where you can fully embody someone other than yourself and have choices that lead to different places and stuff like that. So we've had a really good response from people, and it's been really nice and sort of quite emotional in a way to have conversations with people afterwards, because a lot of the time people will open up to us a lot about their own personal experiences. So I guess it's nice to see it is opening that conversation up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Like when you are working on a project like this, which is very, which tackles like our emotions and struggles, like who do you turn to for help? Like what was your when researching for this game, like who helped you most in understanding this condition and the consequences it has to the person who suffers from it and to their closest ones and to their
We did a lot of research around the topic initially, so because neither of us have direct experience with a family member or anyone who has suffered through dementia. So there's a really good book that we both read called Elizabeth is Missing, which is told from the perspective of the person in that book who has dementia, and it sort of becomes this detective story. It's kind of it was a big inspiration, I think, for the way that Before I Forget was developed. But aside from that and documentaries and things, we also were able to get in touch with two NHS doctors who, so one is someone that also works for a charity called Gaming the Mind, which is a group of doctors who are also interested in the portrayal of mental health and health in general through video games. So we would send the build of the game back to them and they would give us feedback. We had a few calls with them to make sure that the way that we were portraying it was accurate and sensitive to the subject.
So can Before I Forget maybe serve as an educational tool or not?
That's something that we got asked quite a lot, especially earlier on and we've always tried to keep it as more of a fictional experience, more of a story rather than something that would be used in an educational sense, just because although we have collaborated with doctors, we're not doctors ourselves, so we just wanted more to show that games can be used in a way to have stories like this, and as a way to, I suppose, open up the conversation.
Awesome. It's good to start those conversations. Let's now talk a bit about how you got into games. Could you share what your path into the games industry was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a slide on this, and this one I'm going to show you one of my earliest coding projects here. So I came into games from a fairly non-traditional route in that I studied geology and paleontology at university, and always saw making games as more of a hobby because of that. It's something that I really enjoyed, like making games and designing games from a really young age, but it was never really something I considered as a career. But I was interested in both art and coding, and initially being mainly stuck to art and design, as programming always felt something that was quite intimidating and I wasn't really sure where to start. But eventually I did start looking at courses online, just sort of online free YouTube courses, and luckily I had a few friends as well who could code, and they would help me out as well. So,
what did you start? What made you actually conquer that fear of coding, and actually, what did you start with? Like,
in some ways, I think it was just frustration of not being able to make the things that I wanted to make, because I would make little games with friends and I would always do the art in them, but it always got to a point where maybe they wouldn't have time to sort of finish a project, or I wouldn't have time, or I had an idea that I wanted to make that I couldn't find someone to work on it with. So I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it, and I'm gonna see what I can do myself using online resources. So the way I did it was I found some, I don't actually remember the name of the course, but it was just I googled for free C# programming course, and
so
I just
C# is the first step into game development.
Well, that was the way I got into it, just by learning that language. If it is a good language to learn, just because some of the larger game engines like Unity use it. There's other languages as well that you can learn. But I started to learn that, and then I just followed tutorials. So this game on the screen here it kind of began as an example about if statements, just what would happen, like if you type north, then the player will go north, and if you type south, they'll go south. And then I made this little text-based adventure game where it ended up being like this quite elaborate thing that was like Pokemon inspired, where you could have random encounters with creatures and find objects, explore a map. But yeah, it was mainly from just following these tutorials online, and then I think having a project that I was working on while I was doing them, rather than just doing the exact example in the way that they had it, made it really easy to continue on from there as well, and to explore what I could do. Yeah, then after I'd worked on that for a while, I realised quite quickly that it was just getting completely out of scope, and I guess I had all these ideas for it, which I think is quite common for someone getting into game development, is you play all these amazing games and you want to recreate them, and then yeah, I ended up sort of finishing.
It's like the usual story. Like, I have just started game development as a game programmer or a game developer, but I'm gonna make this huge MMO and I'm gonna develop it for 10 years and it's gonna be great. Like, no, like small projects are the stepping stones towards those big projects. But we will talk about that later as well. So could you tell us, like, what are you said, like, you started this, you've learned C#, you started this project, it got out of hand, but what are like the pros and cons of of that like experience? Like what are the biggest lessons you have learned through this through that experience?
I think so. Let's see. I've got some other ones here as well that are like a similar kind of thing where I just had like an idea that was basically, I think one of the important things to consider is like what tool you are using to make the game. And so, for example, with that previous game, I didn't really have any limitations on what I was doing. It was pretty much endless, and I think especially when you're starting out, it is good to have some kind of limitation because it helps you to stay focused on what you're doing. I think it's so in terms of the pros of learning a language and building a sort of larger game like that. I suppose you are learning those skills that you can then apply to other things, and there's a lot of different software that you can use that where you can you'll need to learn to code within it. But if it's more from a sort of design perspective, I think that it's good to have something that keeps you kind of focused on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like these examples here, I had a much smaller design initially than my previous game. So the one with the moving the GIF was going to be a small game about making choices. So you'd go along a little line, and then you'd come to a choice where you'd have to choose which line to go down next. And it was just going to be, it was supposed to be some really simple kind of metaphor almost for the difficulty of making choices in life. But I got really caught up in how to do that technically. I think just because there were so many different ways of doing it. And so I lost sight of the original concept of the game.
I kind of like it how you got caught in the game, which tackles like decision fatigue and the anxiety that that we have when faced with too many choices. But so that happened to you as well. Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
So what do you use? You've said this game was developed in Unity. Why did you choose actually working in Unity, and do you use it still? Like,
yeah, the GIF here is Unity, and before I forget, it's made in Unity as well. I chose it because I think at the time it was just sort of what everyone was using. So I began to learn it around 7 years ago, properly, I think 6-7 years ago, and it just seemed to be the thing that everyone was using. That I didn't really think to look for anything else, to be honest. So, and I do still use it. I mean, it's an amazing piece of software. I mean, it's free for a start, which is really good. And there's a lot of online documentation for it, and it can do a lot of things. But it does require, well, it's moving towards a point where you might not need to be able to code, but most of the time it does require you to be able to code. So it's a bit of a steep learning curve.
Okay, so it's great that we have Bitsy and other online tools which don't require any coding knowledge or experience. Also, so let's talk a bit now about the small tools and Bitsy. So can you tell us more about it? How did you find out about it? And actually, like, why did you start using it? And why do you still stick to it?
So in terms of small tools, so a tool is just something that you can use to create a game. So sometimes they're referred to as game engines, and I guess a tool would be a type of game engine. A small tool is something that generally doesn't involve like a huge software download, and they're often browser based and free, and yeah, like you say, don't need to be able to code. And I initially found out about Bitsy about 2.5-3 years ago, I think. Just through Twitter, I remember seeing people posting these really interesting looking screenshots of this pixel art aesthetic, and I was just really confused as to how so many people were posting these things that looked like really similar. So I had no idea that they were all made in the same tool. So I kind of followed through one of the links that someone had posted and found out that it was made in this tool called Bitsy. So that's where I kind of discovered that. And I just really liked that all the games created in it had this really similar aesthetic. They all felt really mysterious as well. I think there's something about how the limited color palette and the limited number of pixels on the screen means that your mind like fills in all the gaps and tells a story that isn't there. I think it makes it, there's definitely like a sense of mystery to it that really grabbed me.
Awesome. Like, so now you have shared the things that you like most about Bitsy, but is there something that you don't like, or can maybe like suggest the creator like to change? Like, how can you further develop the tool?
I actually spent a lot of today going through some of the updates because I haven't used it in a little while. So one of the really great things about it is that the developer is really actively, he does like listen to what the feedback people are giving. And so if the community is saying, oh, we really want this feature in there, then he often will put that in a future update. So I don't know what I would add. In some ways, it's changed quite a bit since I started using it, and I almost quite liked when it was smaller. It's not big now, but it's got like a little bit bigger and there's more features, which I think is really great. But there's something really special about tools that have these, they manage to be sort of whole and complete with such strong constraints on them. And I think so I guess my one thing would be I wouldn't want it to get too much bigger, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah. We've mentioned before, like too many choices makes us hit the wall and make us give up. So could you tell us more? Like, what do you use Bitsy for? Like, what are the games you have made creating Bitsy, and how has it helped? How has it helped you as a game developer?
So I've got some screenshots from the Bitsy editor here. So it's you're constricted to this pixel art aesthetic, and the general way that you interact with the Bitsy game is you can use the arrow keys to move your character around the screen and then go up to other characters or objects, and then they'll have a piece of text that you can read. And there's a few other features, like you can pick up objects as well, or you can maybe get a key to open the door and that kind of thing. So it's really good for making these little kind of adventure games or story games, or sort of personal games, anything that's, I guess, focused on exploration and storytelling. But
what would you say, like, is like the biggest? So you use Bitsy, and we will talk about it, like, for your like little personal projects. Like, what is in your opinion, like, what is the biggest value of on working on such small projects and of experimenting with or making like game experiments like you do? Like, what does it bring you as a game developer?
I think so. I use it, I guess, for a few different things. Sometimes I use it for personal reflections, I guess. So almost like diary entries, which for me, I've never really had a diary, so it's quite a nice way of, I suppose, reflecting on something or having somewhere that I can put what I'm feeling into an experience. So it's nice to be able to do that in a really quick way. There's a couple of games that I've made in just a few hours, or even just a couple of hours, and it's quite therapeutic in that sense. And then I've made other games where it's been, I guess, nice to just make a tiny little world and experiment with how the people in that world interact with each other and sort of immerse myself in that. So I think it's just really nice to be able to make something very quickly and easily. And I know that other people as well use it for sort of prototyping larger game ideas as well, even if they end up making that game in a different engine. So even if they end up making it in Unity or Unreal or something completely different, you can still test some of the world or maybe some of the simpler mechanics in a way that means you're not spending lots of time committing yourself to a big code base that you might then have to rewrite anyway. It's really good for getting a sense of a larger project as well.
Awesome. Can we talk a bit about the projects you have made using Bitsy?
Yeah, the first one I've got up here was the first one I made actually. So this one's called Cats Out of the Bag, and I made this for Adam, the creator of Bitsy, runs a Bitsy game jam online every month, where
we have a new batch of Bitsy games. Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. So
are you still a regular?
Oh, I every month I think like I'm gonna do a Bitsy game this month, and I've said that to myself this month as well. There is a current one that ends in a few days. I think it's in 3 or 4 days time. So I am going to try and do that one, but I haven't actually done one in a little while.
Okay. I'm fingers crossed that you join the next one and finish the game.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, this one was for, so Adam on his Twitter, he tends to do a Twitter poll of what the theme should be for the next jam, and then you can vote on it. This one was in September 2017, and the theme was a secret, as in the phrase a secret. So I wanted to make, I hadn't really started using Bitsy as a way to make personal games yet, so I decided to make this kind of like John Hughes film inspired game about this girl in a school who was pretty reclusive and kind of she just like sneaks around the air vents and listens into people's conversations and then spreads loads of rumors. So she's maybe not a great person, but I mean I'm sure she's got her own stuff going on. But she just kind of stirs up all the drama in the school, and I made this like YouTube playlist to go along with it as well, and got really into planning all the narrative and doing all the art. And this was probably the longest Bitsy game that in terms of the length of development. It took a couple of weeks of just like evenings and bits of weekend work.
Overall. And the gameplay itself, how many hours or minutes are we talking about?
I think it's about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, something like that. So it's not long. I suppose it depends on how quickly you read, but there's about 10 different rooms I think that you can go in, and then you can see sort of the number of people that you can speak to in each room.
Awesome. And where can we find this game? Can we play? Can we try it out after the webinar?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got some links at the end of the slides. One of those is my itch.io account, which has got this and all my other games as well. So
awesome. We'll make sure to share all the links in our Q&A box to share it with all the attendees.
Yeah, so it's really nice. I think the nice thing about this was it was the first time, because it was still like a relatively large idea for a game, I suppose, in terms of Bitsy game at least. But I really noticed that I wasn't having the normal kind of scope